We are counting down the 8 best matches in the career of Rey Mysterio as we count down the weeks to Sound Off episode 619, coming up on September 29th. One of Mysterio's all-time greatest opponents, and some people might even say his best opponent, the one that he worked probably the most with early in his career, was Psychosis, or Psychosis, depending on who the announcers were. In WCW, he was Psychosis, so we'll call him Psychosis. Even Bret Hart once famously gave him props in a promo in WCW, although he called him Hypnosis before Gene Okerlund quickly corrected him. Mysterio and Psychosis wrestled all over the place throughout 1995, 1996. Probably had just dozens of matches together. One that stands out, and this is actually not number 7 on the list, but I do think that it's worth mention here, is their 2 out of 3 Falls match on ECW Hardcore TV. The October 17, 1995 episode, which is archived on the WWE Network if you want to go check it out. It's hard to go back and watch those old ECW shows because of all the music that they've dubbed over, but again, still worth going back and checking out. The two of them each made their ECW debut against one another the month before that match at the ECW Gangsta's Paradise show. Mysterio won that match, so this was the rematch. And Rey was only 21 years old when this match took place. So 2 out of 3 falls. Rey took the first fall with a Hurricane Rana into a pin. Psychosis took the second fall after catching Rey off of a moonsault attempt into a tombstone. And Psychosis took the third and deciding fall with a twisting senton off the top rope onto a chair. But not before hitting a senton on Rey through the table that Rey was on, outside the ring. And that impressed one of the fans in the crowd enough that he actually turned to look at the camera. He turned to look at the hard camera and stared right at its soul. And he turned back around. This was innovative stuff back then. At least here in this country it was. I'm sure in Mexico this was something that they were accustomed to seeing. But ECW bringing these guys in was really bringing in a style that a lot of American wrestling fans were not used to seeing. And these guys just tore it up. And it was a great match. So these two, a few months later, had another match. Surprise, surprise. They had a non-tournament exhibition in Japan at the Super J Cup in December of 95 that was very good. And both men were very upset being left out of the tournament. They were only in an exhibition. It was a non-tournament match. So they did what anybody would do who was pissed off about being left out. They proceeded to steal the show. And that wasn't even the best match that the two of them had together. Which brings us to match number 7 in the countdown. Rey Mysterio Jr. against Psychosis in the opening match of WCW Bash at the Beach 1996. This match gets overshadowed because of something else that happened on the same show that night. You may have heard about it. You know, Hulk Hogan coming back as the third man with Hall and Nash turning heel on WCW and forming this little group called the NWO or something like that. So Rey had made his WCW debut the month before at the Great American Bash. He challenged Dean Malenko for the Cruiserweight Championship, his first match on pay-per-view. And he lost. He fell short. He did not win the championship. So this was only his second pay-per-view appearance. They brought in Mike Tenay on commentary because he knew all the history between these two. He knew all the history of the Luchadors, and he had called, I think, the When Worlds Collide show in 94. So he joined Tony Schiavone, Dusty Rhodes, and Bobby Heenan on commentary. You know, we talk about 3-man announce crews. We had a 4-man booth for this match here on this show. But it's a good thing he did. It's a good thing Tenay did join them because Schiavone and Dusty and Heenan had absolutely no clue how to call this match. It was just comical. I mean, Schiavone was fine, I guess. But it's comical to listen to Bobby Heenan cracking jokes on these guys and Dusty Rhodes being Dusty Rhodes. Heenan at one point said that one of these guys, that being Psychosis, has hair like Peg Bundy from Married with Children. It kind of makes me sad there's going to be people who go back and watch these shows on the network and going to listen to that and go, who's Peg Bundy? Anyway, first half started out with some mat wrestling by the standards of these two, and it was actually pretty slow. It was actually a pretty slow start to the match. once it kicked into high gear, it just was a level apart from anything else that WCW was doing at the time, or WWE for that matter. And it was not long before Psychosis nearly spiked himself on a suicide dive out to the floor onto Rey. Heenan said that he bent one of his horns, which he did not. Tenay said that Rey told him that his idol as a youngster was Scott Steiner, which is where he gets the Frankensteiner from, the Hurricane Rana. Springboard into the Hurricane Rana by Rey, only good for a 2 count though. So with Rey on the floor, Psychosis hits a top rope senton. He got height on this senton. So Rey is on the ground. Rey Mysterio is not even on a table. He is laying on the floor, on that thin mat outside the ring. Psychosis from the top rope jumps high into the air and just lands with his weight. And it's not fun for Psychosis either, I would imagine, to take that move. And just hits this senton on the floor. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. You know, we're used to seeing guys now do running sentons. Samoa Joe does it in every match. It seems like a lot of the heavier guys love to do the running senton. Killian Dane does it in NXT. But this is different, though. I mean, you're coming off the top rope like that. I mean, that's a lot of impact. That's a lot of impact. If not on the other guy, that's a lot of impact on your own rear end. So, fast forward, Psychosis is on the apron, and Rey climbs up to the top rope. He jumps off the top rope. He hits a Frankensteiner off the apron down to the floor. He takes Psychosis down to the floor. Rey springboards off the ropes with a drop kick to the back of Psychosis' head. Psychosis goes sliding all the way out under the bottom rope to the floor. Rey is on the apron now, and Rey hits a twisting Asai moonsault, and his foot hits the top of the guardrail on the way down. Heenan is just mortified by the names of all of these moves. He hears Tenay calling the Asai moonsault. He goes, the Asai what? He just could not believe that Tenay would know the names to all these moves. Psychosis puts Rey up on the turnbuckles. He climbs up. He turns his back to Rey, and he's climbing up. So he's in a position where he looks like he's going to give Rey a razor's edge off the top rope. This is a famous finish here to this match. Well, the move he was going to give him, as Tenay pointed out, is a move that is called Splash Mountain. And he goes to give him Splash Mountain, but on the way down, Rey turns it into a Hurricane Rana. He Hurricane Rana's Psychosis over, and that is good enough to score the pin. Not enough to just hear me talk about the finish. It's a great finish, and the crowd popped huge for it, and Dusty was going nuts for it. Heenan was going nuts for it. I think Dusty was the one who he did this Phil Rizzuto right. He goes, "Holy cow, Phil Rizzuto," says Dusty Rhodes. The next night on Nitro, Mysterio did finally win his first Cruiserweight title. He did beat Dean Malenko. He would hold the championship all the way to Halloween Havoc. And like the match that Mysterio had with Kurt Angle at SummerSlam, which I had last week as number 8 in the countdown, this is one of the best opening matches to a pay-per-view that you'll ever see. And it was a big part of Nitro's winning formula in those early days when they would feature the Cruiserweights in the opening match on Monday nights to set the tone for the entire show. It's a formula that I think Eric Bischoff, and who knows exactly what role it is that he has. I've heard so many conflicting things about what Bischoff's actual status is on SmackDown. Oh, he's going to be the creative force behind SmackDown. Well, he's not really going to have anything to do with the writing. He's more there to just make sure that the processes behind the scenes are going smoothly. And, oh, well, he'll be the liaison with Fox and WWE because Bischoff has a lot of TV experience. Who the hell knows? Bischoff could end up becoming, a paratrooper or something. Who the fuck knows what he's going to be doing for this show? But if Bischoff has any control over the layout of the show and the format of the show, even if he's not having a hand in the actual writing and the creative, hey, Eric Bischoff was the guy who was in charge on Monday Nitro when they brought in the Cruiserweights and they were opening the show on most weeks with them. Now Bischoff, maybe he can bring some of that to SmackDown. Maybe if the rumors are true and the 205 Live roster ends up being absorbed into SmackDown and those guys, the Cruiserweights now, are going to be on Friday nights. You've got Eric Bischoff behind the scenes. It seems like a pretty easy formula. Start the show hot. Maybe not everybody knows who these guys are. You think people, when they started putting Rey Mysterio and Juventud and Blitzkrieg and Psychosis and La Parka and all these guys at the beginning of Nitro, you think most of the audience knew who they were? Of course not. But they let them go out there for 10 or 15 minutes and just wow the audience. I think it would be different now because, again, it was something that a lot of fans, I think, in America were not exposed to in 1996. A very different world in 1996. Now, we've seen every style there is to see. All we see are high spots on TV every week. You've got big guys who have no business doing topes out of the ring, doing them for the sake of doing them because we got to go to a commercial. So let's hit a dive. That just wasn't the case back then. So maybe it wouldn't work. But I do think there is something to be said for opening the show hot and not with a frickin' promo every week. Not with Shane McMahon dancing to the ring. Shane McMahon could dance to the ring in segment 2 or segment 3. Doesn't have to be in segment 1. Start the show hot. Send these guys out there. You're going to be on Fox. You may have people watching who have never watched a day of wrestling in their lives. They've got a lot of talented guys in that division. Send them on out there. Get the crowd hooked. Then you can go right into whatever angle or match or whatever it is with the big names. That's one of the things that Bischoff did right with Nitro and with WCW back then. So to go back and watch a lot of these, Rey matches, as I've done the last few weeks, and I watched a lot of his WCW matches, this was just one of them. It is interesting to go back and just see how the way that they were doing things back then. But that was 22 years ago, 23 years ago. It's a long time.